It seems that too often people feel stuck with a choice. Protest or listen. Push back or build bridges. Doug Teschner and Beth Malow say that's a false choice. And today they're going to tell you why. Welcome back, my friends, to the Derate the Hate podcast. I'm your host, Wilk Wilkinson, your blue-collar sage, calming outrage and helping to navigate a world divided by fog and those who would spread that fear, outrage, and grievance. The Derate the Hate podcast is proudly produced in collaboration with Braver Angels, America's largest grassroots, cross-partisan organization working towards civic renewal. This podcast amplifies the mission that we share to foster a more respectful and united America where civic friendship thrives even when we disagree. Each week, through the power of story, conversation, and connection with incredible guests, we work to build bridges instead of barriers. Not to change minds on the issues, but to change how we see one another when we differ. Because, friends, it really is about bettering the world one attitude at a time. We did not create the hate, but together we can derate the hate. So be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, share it with a friend, and visit braverangels.org to learn how you can get involved in the movement to bridge the partisan divide. Friends, I am so incredibly grateful that you have joined me for another powerful Derate the Hate episode. So let's get to it. A while back, on DTH episode 266, I had Doug Teschner and Beth Malow on the show. They had a book coming out, a book about contempt, political division, and what regular people can actually do about it. Well, that book, Beyond the Politics of Contempt, it's been out now for a while. And I wanted to get them back on just to hear how it's landing. Doug is a former New Hampshire state rep and a Peace Corps director. Beth is a neurologist and a Braver Angels facilitator who gave a TEDx talk on communicating across disagreement. They've been everywhere promoting this book, including some media spaces that don't exactly lean toward the bridge building side of things. We're covering a lot of ground today. The black pill mindset, outrage entrepreneurs, and whether being an activist and a bridge builder are really opposites, or whether that's just the story we're being told. Another great conversation here on DTH. Let's get into it with my friends, Doug and Beth. Here we go. All right, Doug Teschner and Beth Malow, thank you so much for joining me here again on the Derate the Hate podcast. It is so wonderful to see both of you again today.
It's great to be with you, Wilk.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've been excited to get this catch-up session on tape, so to speak, right? But I had you guys on the podcast back in episode 266 of Derate the Hate to talk about the book you had coming out at the time called Beyond the Politics of Contempt, Practical Steps to Build Positive Relationships in Divided Times. The book has since come out, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about it, about your experiences with promoting the book, the kind of feedback that you guys have been getting. And then we'll just talk more broadly, obviously, about our work together as Braver Angels. At the date of this recording, we are just in some wild times in terms of civic discourse, political discourse, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So I'll start with you, Doug, is the book. What has been the response of the book, and what is your reaction to that response?
Well, thank you, Wilk. And, we've had a lot of interest in the book. I mean, we've sold over 1,000 copies. There's been a lot of interest within Braver Angels, of course, but, a lot of interest among the public. I think people are hungry for something different. The challenge is how do we connect with them? How do we get them in the door? And this is the same challenge for Braver Angels. There's a quote in our book that happens to be my quote. If it screams, it streams, and if it's kind, pay no mind.
Oh my
And
God.
this is sort of the challenge we have with the book and with Braver Angels is, how to get people's attention, how to get it so people know about it. Once people know about it, I think they're pretty interested. And, there's a lot of angst out there. And I think we're trying to create some, among this politics of fear, this politics of contempt, trying to give people some hope. I think people are really hungry for hope that we can offer to them. And I just think about a recent event we had with actually the Sharon, Vermont Democrats. It was snowing last Saturday, but 40 people showed up. And there was a lot of people are really curious and hungry and want something better and are worried.
Oh, for sure. And Beth, the same question. I mean, as the responses flow in from the book, what is your reaction to what you've seen so far in the responses to the book that's come out?
Yes, I have been really uplifted. We have close to 50 Amazon reviews that have just been really kind and supportive, and have many people have given us 5 stars. It's been really nice. And then we also won an award. We won a Literary Titan Award for our book Content, which is exciting, and have been asked to go to different book festivals and exhibit. So that's been all fantastic. I will say that one of the things that really uplifts me is reaching out to Braver Angels. So, for example, I was chosen to exhibit at a book festival in Tucson, Arizona in March, which is super exciting because everybody who lives in New England has to get out of New England in March. I would think Minnesota too, right? It's just like you're waiting for it to be spring. Well, I wrote to the Braver Angels of Tucson and immediately got back, hey, we want to do an event. We want to bring everybody together to hear about you after your book festival. And we also want to invite other people from the community. We want to invite the League of Women Voters, and we want to invite this group and that group. And it's so exciting to me to see our book help further the Braver Angels mission, attract new members, help people who are in Braver Angels get rejuvenated. So we've really enjoyed that element. And we're also incredibly grateful to Braver Angels for their support of our book in terms of really bringing people out. I will say one more thing. I love New England. I recently moved here from Tennessee, as you know, and not only is it great working with Doug and the New England alliances, there's a special, like we really have had a lot of interest from both the press here and these local gatherings that we've done. There's a hunger, particularly up here, for the civic renewal and the citizen-led solutions and the small town government. And what we're trying to figure out now is how do we get that out there throughout the country and the nation? How do we capture that and get that? So that's our new challenge.
And that is the $1 million question, Beth, is how do we scale that enthusiasm? Because I have conversations with people from all over the country, and they talk about all the different wonderful things that they've got going on in their particular community, and we see that angst, like Doug was talking about. We see it on the news. We see the anger and the upheavals in other communities, but I'm not necessarily seeing that in my community, which always leads me to just say what we see online, what we see in the news. I mean, to Doug's point, if it screams, it streams. What we see online and what we see in the news is not always representative of real life for everybody. The reality is most of the country in our individual communities are not nearly as separated, not nearly as torn as many online would have you believe. And I think that's a really important takeaway, whether it's, whether we're talking about Braver Angels or the Bridging Space more broadly, or your book, Beyond the Politics of Contempt, is when we start to think about these things, there are some very ugly things that are going on in our country and in the world today, but it's not representative of everything. One thing, a term that I've been hearing, and I've got to look into it a little bit more, but it's just a very dark term. It's something I've been seeing online more and more is, the black pill effect. We've seen red pill, we've seen blue pilled, but now there's this thing called black pilled, where there's a whole group of people that just say, it's all over, nothing can be fixed. We're beyond. We're beyond the possibility of fixing anything. Everything's too far gone. Let's talk about that a little bit, because I think that mindset is a direct downstream effect of the politics of contempt.
We know from our Brave Angel workshops that if you get people in the room, that they find out they have a lot more common ground than they believed going into it. And there are people who are just trying to push us apart, the conflict entrepreneurs they're not doing it for the country. They're doing it for their own power and their own benefit. And, we have a graphic in the book. We try to make the book really sort of easy to read and user friendly. And we have some of these, and we have some graphics. And the graphic we came up with for the conflict entrepreneur is a crocodile trying to eat the American flag. And this is what it's all about. I mean, we all got to step back and say, wait a minute, we're all being manipulated here, and I put myself in the same category. We're all being manipulated. Maybe I'm being manipulated less than other people, but we've got to really wait a minute. We have a lot of common ground as Americans. Who are we as Americans? What's important to our American values? And when you really, we need to get past this sort of grievance politics that's being exploited now. I heard that term, and I think it really applies. The idea that the us versus them, that we can't talk to them, and because they're so evil. But if we can't talk to them, we're not going to know who they are and what they believe and whether we have anything in common. So, yeah, it's a dark time in our country, but we have to approach it from a point of view. What can we do about it? We're trying to bring a little hope to the world in our book and some very practical steps that what people can do.
Oh, that's right. And Beth, talk to me then about, I know some of you guys have done kind of a virtual book tour in many senses. You've been on a number of different podcasts and done some great interviews with some higher profile people. And some of those people do tend to lean closer towards that, we can't coexist with these people. What kind of response have you gotten from some of those in the media that just think, okay, maybe we are too far gone, maybe we're too far apart, maybe the sides in that battle of us versus them are too far apart, and bridging that divide is going to be too much of an undertaking? What kind of things that are you hearing when you guys are doing those types of interviews?
Well, we've actually been surprised. So, for example, we were interviewed by two high-profile conservatives. One is Alex Marlow, the editor-in-chief of Breitbart News. The other was Michelle Tafoya, who's a conservative podcast host. And what was interesting about both of those is they seem to have the same take that you do on the conflict entrepreneurs and the fact that we're all being pushed apart. And I thought that was wonderful to hear. I did push back a little bit on Alex Marlow because he asked me, do you think that liberals are more closed-minded than conservatives? And I said, well, it's really on both sides, number one. I think everybody is being stirred up, including foreign powers and others who are trying to push us apart as Americans. Like I saw there was even a fake AI ICE video that is out there now circulating.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah.
There's a lot of that. And then he also, I feel like it's also really important not to put people in boxes. So,
That's right.
There are some people who voted for Trump who like his policies, but feel that he could be a little bit less divisive, right? Or a little, yeah. And then there are some liberals who see, I mean, I like to see myself as one of them, who feel that, we need to take more of an MLK Jr. approach, right? When we protest. Protesting is good. I think protesting can be combined with bridge building and listening to people who are different than us. And still, what we're hearing from our new CEO, Maury Giles, is the idea of courageous citizenship. You listen to others, you also speak what you believe. So you protest what upsets you. You also leave space to understand where other people are coming from who disagree with you. And it's a great strategy, I think, to have, because if anything, it hones your own arguments. And sometimes you learn something that
it absolutely
you might have missed.
It absolutely, I mean, going to the idea of protesting, and I will say this, Beth and Doug, that I truly believe that protesting is part of the DNA of who we are as Americans. I mean, it's been one of those things that has been part of our American story from the very beginning. It's totally ingrained in the American experiment, as well it should be. Where I do have big problems is when those protests become violent, become destructive. I mean, the destruction of property, or when when protests become more, when you start to inhibit a government official's ability to do something else. Now we've entered new territory. Now that's not protest, that's crime. When we start to damage the property of another, whether it be a business or an individual, when you start to damage other people's property, now we're into a different place. We're no longer protesting; it's a crime. You brought up, Alex Marlow on Breitbart has always been one who he pushes the line sometimes in terms of that kind of outrage entrepreneur and that kind of media strategy, and so does Michelle Tafoya to a certain extent. There's always going to be those people out there, but the biggest thing to understand is, when we are having these conversations, and Doug, I'll have you weigh in on this a little bit heavier. When we're having those conversations, even the smartest and brightest out there in our media suffer from their own kind of affective polarization, right? I do, as a conservative within the bridging space, I suffer from it just like others do. It's something that I have to constantly keep myself in check on. And so when Alex Marlow asked that question about, but don't you think it comes, don't you think that comes a little bit more from the left? Not really. It's when you start to open your mind to that broader idea that this isn't a one-sided thing, that effective polarization gets everybody. Doug, weigh in on that for me, would you?
Well, I think that's the key. That's the key to the whole us versus them mentality, is to embrace the fact that they're evil, that they're stupid. And then when we talk about effective polarization, polarization's fine when it comes to how we have different points of view. And in Brave Angels, we encourage people to have different points of view. And in fact, in our politics, it's essential that we have different points of view and that people are free to express their points of view. The problem becomes when we talk about this effective polarization, becomes, if you don't agree with me, you're evil, you're stupid, right, you're not patriotic. And when we go down, it's a rabbit hole, a very dangerous rabbit hole. And I hear it even from family members on the left. And we're not going to talk to those people. We have nothing to say. But of course, where's the end goal in this? Where are we going? In marriage counseling, I mean, Bill Doherty has a background in marriage counseling, and a lot of our techniques in Braver Angels are built around the marriage counseling ideas. And there's a famous, well-known couple, the Gottmans, who do marriage counseling, have talked about that word contempt. When you reach a point of contempt, it becomes sort of a point where maybe it's not possible to hold the marriage together again. But we don't have that luxury when it comes to a country. We do not have the luxury of a divorce. And I think as people, as we wrap ourselves around these conversations with folks, we have to sort of get back to, well, what's our goal? What's our goal to not talk to those people on the other side? We want a civil war? Is that something we want to divide the country? This is very dangerous. And when we're so self-righteous, we talk about in our book and about, we talk about treating people with dignity and respect as sort of essential elements. But but how do you do that? And you do that by good listening skills, which have kind of gone out. Stephen Covey, the famous, the well-known author of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, talks about listening to understand and not to respond. Gosh, we need that more. But another aspect I'd add to it is humility. We seem to have lost humility as sort of as an important quality of who we are as people. So in our book, we talk a lot about values. We talk a lot about, looking within yourself. It's got to start within yourself and living up to who are you and what you believe and how you treat others.
Yeah, it absolutely. When we think about Stephen Covey and the Seek First to Understand, it's one of these things that is so incredibly important. When we're having conversations, and really it does start with strong dialogue. In going back to something that Beth said earlier about the next chapter of Braver Angels and Maury Giles and courageous citizenship and what courageous citizenship really is. Courageous citizenship is really about reclaiming our personal agency and having the courage to speak, but also having the courage to listen, and to listen with intention to those people that we know we're going to disagree with. That contempt that you talk about, Doug, often comes out of a misperception of what the other side believes, who the other side, other side in quotes, is. We don't, that effective polarization thing that we started, we kind of keyed on there, is based quite often in misperceptions of the other side. We start to lose sight of our points of commonality. But when we start to listen with intention, Beth, and I'm going to have you key in on this, when we start to listen with intention to those that we disagree with, we start to realize how much we actually have in common. And just dive into that a bit more for me, because it is so important to have the courage to listen, to dispel those misinterpretations we have of the other side.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you a story. I think fear also is a big motivator. And one of the things I've done since the book has come out is to be very careful not to say, oh, I'm an open-minded liberal. I have friends who voted for Trump, whatever. I'm happy I do, but I'm also trying to be as open-minded to my friends who are progressives, who are, think the world is on fire and what should they do, right? Mm-hmm. And how could we possibly build when the world is on fire? So the story I want to share briefly is a friend of mine, an older man, a Christian conservative in Nashville. And I actually believe bonding with somebody first is huge, whether it be singing in a chorus, playing on a sports team. In this case, my husband bought a gun, right? And when my Christian conservative older male friend heard about this, he said, well, we need to go out to breakfast and I need to tell you all about guns and what gun you can buy as a woman and you can shoot the gun through this pink purse. And it was a little ridiculous, but I went. And,
Okay.
and I think what happened, and he came, of course, with his MAGA hat on, not a red hat like Doug is wearing, but, the Make America Great hat. And I was fine. I was like, let's have breakfast and let's chat. And I learned a few things, right? I didn't actually buy the pink purse, but I learned a few things. And then I said to him, hey, let's go to lunch. I'm going to take you to lunch. Let's talk about medically appropriate abortions, because I'm a doctor and I had some things I wanted to share. And he agreed, and we got to lunch. And the first thing I taught him was that there are reasons that pregnancies can go wrong and ectopics and everything. And it's not that every woman who's pregnant is 13 years old, right, and out of wedlock. There's a lot of reasons for these medically appropriate abortions. At the end of the lunch, he was like, you made some really good points. We need to think about ways we can have medical panels or other things. Mm-hmm. And I was really blown away. First of all, I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And second of all, I opened myself up to a conversation or a series of conversations. And I really believe that if we can get people to realize, as we talked about earlier, that most of us do have a lot in common, and just like not be afraid and just have the courage to have that conversation. And you can speak your mind with a courageous citizenship. You can speak your mind and still listen to other people and give them space. And I feel like that's the message that we really need to push forward. And I applaud our new CEO on the courageous citizenship. Now we just have to get it out there.
Yeah. Well, the whole thing about the Braver Angels Way is one of the first things that we talk about in the Braver Angels Way is our ability to come together, speak freely, fully, and without fear. And in order to do that, we often have to listen without an immense amount of fear as well. That's why I always talk about listening with intention comes with a certain degree of courage, right? Because it's not always comfortable, as in your example there, Beth, it's not always comfortable to sit down and listen to things that may or may not trigger you. You may know that this particular thing, for a conservative, listening to somebody talk about abortion, it may be a very triggering event. That takes courage to sit down and listen to that with intention. Same thing for liberals and the gun debate. Sitting down and listening to a conservative talk about guns and why we like guns and things like that. It's for a lot of people, it's a very triggering event. It takes courage to listen to that. So, Doug, as we round out our time, when you think about what you have, your big takeaways from your time so far since the book has come out, what do you think has been your particular biggest surprise in terms of the response? What is something maybe that you've learned, something that you didn't, kind of going to our friend Monica Guzman's, I never thought of it that way kind of thing. What has been your biggest surprise since the book has come out?
Well, that's a good question. And, when we started the book, we were thinking about you sort of join us and help us save the country. But as I think we got the late, we really started listening to people, we developed other ideas within the book, and since we've been talking to people. I think a great opportunity for Braver Angels is to talk more about how can we help you, as opposed to help you come help us save the country. And so we talk about relationships a lot, and how do you manage difficult relationships. And then we get into how do you deal with your own mental health. There's a lot of really angst out there. Excuse me, about people are really upset, and on both sides. And what can you do to little things that can make you feel better? I think that we've tried to really focus more on that and more helping people with their mental health. And of course, we also have citizen-led solutions, which what can we do in our communities? But one of the things that really has compelled us in late in our time is this integration of activism and bridge building. I think I might have told you before that in the early days before we actually wrote the book, we were approached by a group called the Rise for Freedom that was doing the No Kings type demonstrations, and they asked us to come on and talk to how do you talk to people you disagree with. And I was a little skeptical of this group, but Beth was all in. And we had 700 people on a Zoom call, which was I wish we had 700 people on some of our Brave Angel calls. But I mean, I think people I think people are hungry, and I think we need to do a better job of saying, yes, be a protester if you want, but do it in a way that's respectful. And other people, and that might actually bring people, how do you bring people maybe to your side if you want to protest? So shouldn't that be a goal? Isn't that to show a better way? Rather, I think that this is a bigger challenge for us. Is how can people express their views, but do it with respect, with dignity, with humility, and also vulnerability is not a word we've used today, but we've talked about it. The idea that we have to put ourselves out there and be a little vulnerable and make sure we're living our values.
Yeah. And going to your point about the protest, and then I'm going to ask the same question of Beth. But one of the things that I say quite often, and it goes to the point that you just made, Doug, is when it comes to protesting, if your goal, we talk a lot about desired outcomes at Braver Angels, right? When we have a meeting, or even when I was in the corporate world, desired outcomes is a big thing. If your desired outcome is just to cause chaos, keep doing it that ugly way. But the reality is you cannot hate somebody into believing what you believe. You cannot hate somebody into having your worldview. Beth brought up MLK earlier, and the reality is that MLK was one of his greatest quotes is "Hate cannot drive out hate; only love can do that." These protests that are all about chaos, calamity, and just outrage, those do not move anybody to your side. Beth, so as we again are finishing up our time here, what is your biggest take in terms of a surprise? What is something that you really hadn't thought of, but has come as a surprise to you since the book has come out?
Yeah, I think as a pragmatic, moderate liberal, I really was afraid that progressives would hate me and not be interested in the book. And I've seen the opposite. And I just want to bring to people's attention, we do have a Substack. It's called It's a newsletter, and you can subscribe for free. It's Together Across Differences, and it's togethernow.substack.com. And I bring that up to say that we've continued to explore these themes in essays and, brief little essays, and then even video clips. And the thing that was the most impactful for me was when I asked Monica Guzman, of all people, you mentioned her a moment ago, to join me. And she taught me so much. And I want to say, anybody who wants to go to our Substack, it's called Do I Have to Be Both an Activist and a Bridge Builder? And it's very provocative because the answer is no. If being an activist calls you or being a bridge builder calls you, you don't have to do both. You don't have to bridge build and seek common ground and protest. But, I actually think the two go together really nicely. And the most impactful thing that Monica taught me was we were talking about the fire of activists and how it created our country, right? And it's so powerful. But the downside of the fire, people, it can be destructive, as you say. And people who say, I'm afraid, I'm almost like afraid my fire, I'm afraid that my passion is going to be ignited, or I guess blown out or whatever, suppressed. If I bridge build and I listen to others. And instead, Monica said very brilliantly, That's how you put the fire out. You can still be passionate, but the destructive parts of the fire, which we've all seen,
Exactly.
can be moderated if you can learn to talk to other people. So I think
That's
you can
right.
do both. I think you can absolutely do both. I think you can protest and you can bridge build. And that's the message I'd love to see Braver Angels get out to people is, yes, you can protest if that's your calling, but have in your toolkit the ability to do some listening too, because it will just
That's
make
right.
your argument stronger and you'll get a broader tent and you'll be able to bring more people along. That's my biggest insight.
That's great. And yes, I agree. You can absolutely be an activist and a bridge builder. And bridge building is not, just to reinstill this in so many people who get it wrong. Bridge building is not about giving up your strongly held convictions. Bridge building is not about not having an opinion about a particular hot button issue. Bridge building is about doing it the right way. So, Beth Malow, Doug Teschner, always a pleasure to see both of you. And the book again is Beyond the Politics of Contempt: Practical Steps to Build Positive Relationships in Divided Times. All that information and all the things that we've talked about can be found in the show notes. And very grateful to both of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Friends, I want to thank you so much for tuning in. And if there's anything in this episode that provided exceptional value to you, please make sure to hit that share button. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe to get the Derate the Hate podcast sent to your email inbox every week. We really are better together, so please take a moment to visit braverangels.org and consider joining the movement towards civic renewal and bridging our political divides. This is Wilk wrapping up for the week saying get out there, be kind to one another, be grateful for everything you've got, and remember, it's up to you to make every day the day that you want it to be. With that, my friends, I'm going to back on out of here and we will catch you next week. Take care.